Well, good morning and welcome to this week's Equipping Reflection. Last week we talked a little bit about the challenge of listening and communicating, and hopefully you found it helpful. Uh, this session is all about how we respond to others as we're listening. I know with Jackie and in our conversation together, I can be listening, but kind of disengaged. I can give her the signals that I'm listening, but actually my mind is somewhere else. So whilst I'm present, I'm not really. So a part of listening, and a valuable part of listening, is responding. And responding means giving feedback to the other person in the conversation in an interpretive exchange. It's not just about going, yeah, good, fine, oh, and what did you mean? It's actually about that part of the exchange of information, that communication is in process. So although we're not actually speaking to the other person, we are communicating by being present and listening. Engaging response is critical to achieve shared understanding and meaning. Responding lets the speaker know that the message that they have given has been received as they intended it. And this happens through and during and after a conversation. So when in a conversation you use a head nod or a yep, that makes sense comment, you're providing both verbal and non-verbal communication. I mean, imagine you are sitting there listening to somebody who is giving you the big arms crossed, laying back. What are they saying to you? Whereas if you're sitting forward and on the edge of your chair and engaged and tilting your head and thoughtfully considering, you're communicating a completely different thing. So much of our communication is non-verbal, and we need to give attention to our body language, not to be flitting and furtively looking for the next person to talk with or the latest distraction. Some relatively easy steps to take to enhance communication includes adopting the other person's point of view. In other words, doing your best to see the story from the point of view of wearing their moccasins. This is particularly important when communicating with people from a different cultural background to your own. And it may call you to do some basic research as you prepare for a conversation. One of the facts around this is to enable us to step away from the trap of arguing inside our head with whether or not we agree with what we're hearing, or even preparing to mount some sort of a defense or a rebuttal because we don't like what we're hearing. We want to defend our personal position. That stops us from ensuring that we're comprehensively understanding what we're hearing the other person say. And we need to be aware that our thoughts on a matter may not necessarily be the universally accepted thoughts. Not everyone may necessarily agree with my position or yours on a topic. And so in listening, we need to keep our counsel to ourselves. We need to take ownership of the words and the ideas that we use and express, and to be careful that we don't confuse what we say with what the other person says. I want to talk a little about recall. Recall is about how you understand the message for storing it for future reference and discussion and relationship building and remembering it later. Everyone has a different capacity with recall. Some people are able to remember every detail and can construct an accurate verbatim. A verbatim is a record of meeting. For example, a verbatim between John and Henry will have only two participants. John will say something, J1, Henry will respond, H1. John will say something, J2, Henry will respond, J2, H2. You know what I mean? But I guess a verbatim isn't an interpretation of what is said. It's a recall of data that you can reflect upon later. Others' recall may not be quite so sharp, and you can struggle to remember a takeaway message. The ability to recall usually depends on how well you listen. I know for me, I learned a long time ago, and people say to me that you're great with names, Reese. What's your secret? Do you use a trigger? Actually, I learned to listen. This is what I learned when we introduce ourselves to somebody else or are introduced. Often we listen for our own name, which is really silly because I know what my name is, but I don't know what my new friend's name is. And what I will usually do when I meet someone new is say, John, what a great strong name. John, I'm really pleased to meet you, John. So within the first 3 moments of meeting, I've used his name 3 times, and it helps me lock it in. One of the problems though is if I get someone's name wrong, and then I might have to say, well, John, actually your name is Albert, but it's now Albert who was John, and I have to reprogram how I remember Albert's wonderful name. But it's about listening. And research of children suggests that those who live in the lower strata of income, they recall tasks differently to those who live in higher strata income brackets. So that can also impact how well we listen. Strategies to assist with recall include that you can repeat the information to help you clarify. As I said, when I introduce to someone, I'll say their name. Oh, Naomi. Naomi, what a wonderful name. You know, Naomi was a faithful companion of Ruth. I need to be careful I don't remember Ruth. But, you know, I nail the name in with repeating, or repeating the information. Oh, did I actually hear you say this? And that provides you with an immediate affirmation that you've understood what was intended to be communicated. Questions like, am I hearing you right? This is what I heard you say. Is that what you meant? Then you can use, and some people do, and I'm not so much of a big one on this, but memory aiding strategies like abbreviation or acronym. But I think if you can remember that stuff, just simply remember the content, really. Now, in a longer conversation, it can be helpful to chunk your information. And as you're constructing a verbatim, that you remember this piece of the information, and then you remember that piece of the information, and this piece of the information. You might have a recall that you can chunk the parts of the conversation together and then put it into the order as your recall says, no, I didn't say that there, that actually was said there. And you can then construct the verbatim, the recall of the story. I know for me, if I'm having a significant conversation that has potential of significant outcomes, I will go away immediately after a meeting and write down a verbatim. And the number of times that's helped to bring clarity around what has been not only said but communicated, it's been a significant strategy for me, where we attempt to minute the conversation, to jot it down, or better still, journal. Sometimes with our phones and our devices, you might be able to say to someone, hey, that's a really significant idea. Do you mind if I jot it down? Or you might have a pen and pad in your pocket. Hey, that's a great idea. I just would like to carry that with me for later. Is that okay? And that sort of practice assists our listening and our recall and our attention. So I have an exercise for you to do right now. Have a simple 3 to 5 minute conversation with the nearest person. Might be your wife, your husband, could be a neighbor, maybe even a child, a sibling, just a conversation with someone. Make sure it's not the television because they can't reply. But the topic is what you had for breakfast this morning versus what your favorite breakfast actually is. For me, I actually had Vitabrits with yogurt and full cream milk. But my favorite breakfast, I must confess, is toast with smashed avo, poached eggs with a hollandaise sauce and some nicely prepared bacon on the side, or maybe smoked salmon. But anyway, have a conversation with someone, and then once you've shared the exchange of ideas, immediately afterwards write a simple verbatim of that conversation. Then sit down and share with the person that you had the conversation with and debrief your discussion. Note any similarities. Identify any differences. And if there are any differences, see if you can discover why that may be the case. Note that, have you been able to capture the conversation well? And why might that be the case? Have a crack at that. 3 to 5 minutes, away you go. You can pause the video at this point. Welcome back. Well, now we can talk a little bit about rating the conversation, because every conversation we rate everything that we engage in, and we subconsciously rate on 3 levels. We decide whether or not we agree with the message. We'll place the message in a context of other information that we have to process around that idea, and then we evaluate the value of what we've heard. We do well to remember that if we disagree with a message, it doesn't mean we have to be disagreeable with the person. The challenge at this point is to do our best to place ourselves inside the other's story, to see things from their context or their point of view. Some helpful probing questions, open-ended questions that seek to open up a conversation to assist with this might look like this. Oh, that's an interesting point of view. Are you able to share with me how you came to that conclusion? Or you could say something like, I've never thought of it that way before. Can you tell me more? Or it could be, do you have any books or articles or websites that I can visit to get a better understanding of how you came to that conclusion? Or it might be, can you help me understand your journey to come to that position? Or it might be, what are some of the questions that shaped your inquiry around this idea, that you've interacted with to come to this conclusion? Rating a message from another person's field of experience, it allows us to have the opportunity to distinguish between the facts, inferences, and opinions. And these are all critical factors in evaluating a message. I know if someone has a particular area of expertise that I don't have, I'm more willing to listen and take on board their take on things. There are some friends that I ring around political ideas to get their take on it. There are some friends I ring around scientific ideas to get their take on it. Economic ideas to get their take on it, that help me in my thinking. See, establishing consistency and cohesiveness can only ever be made after direct observation. Otherwise, our own influences will fill in some of the conversation's missing pieces or gaps. And that requires us to go beyond that which is said, and that's not good in the context of healthy communication. Our recollection then is shaped more by our own opinions and experiences than by the intent of the message the other person is attempting to communicate. Sometimes people aren't able to find words to describe their feelings. And the greatest gift that you can give a person at this point is the gift of presence, time, and language. It wouldn't be the first time I've reached to my drawer to grab out a box of feeling cards, to put out a number of words, to give people words to express what's going on for them that they can't find themselves. Or I use Professor Google with just type in feeling words and get a list of words to help a person become unstuck. So the reason for asking clarifying questions, it's not that you're looking to challenge why people feel the way they feel, but so that you can understand their understanding and the authorities that have informed their understanding. By gaining clearer understanding of the facts of their story and what's contributed to it, you have the opportunity to consider these elements as you then consider and craft your own response story. It also gives you time to pray and invite the Holy Spirit to do the work that only He can do. Our second exercise for today is this. Imagine that you're listening to someone who is speaking with hateful or offensive language. You believe in healthy and positive attitudes towards others and dignified speech, but you've found yourself in a conversation alone with this story. Just note down how you think your listening may be affected by this person's words. What do you or should you do, if anything, to work towards a healthy shared meaning? Consider that for a moment or two, and then come back for a few final comments. You can turn the video off now. Well, thank you for engaging this reflection today. I hope it's been helpful, and I'll look forward to talking with you again in another couple of weeks. Thanks again.